Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Shanker Vijay. I'm a GP lead in the London Digital Transformation team, and I'm not here alone. I'm supported by other members of teams and colleagues. So first of all, big shout out to Nusrat, who you probably know, who's helped organise everything for you today. And in the chat, you'll see Nicole Patel, who's part of the national team around the register with the GP surgery service, which is what we're going to be talking to you about today. I've also got Ian Lee, who's part of my London team as well. So first of all, please make the most of this session. It could last up to an hour, depending on how we go with questions. And we're here to talk about this product you can see on the left-hand side, the registration product for new patients for your practice, which is totally free and part of the NHS offer. And all the way throughout, there are QR codes, so you can scan them to either try the product with this one on the left here, or for more information, you can scan the one on the top right there. So without ado, as we've mentioned, this session has been recorded. It may be hosted on YouTube as a recording. So if you don't want to be captured, please turn off your cameras, turn off your mics. Post questions in the chat. We'll try to answer your questions as we go through and also at the end. Great. So sometimes a picture can be 1,000, and this is how a video can be like 1,000,000 maybe. So here's a little bit of a light-hearted start as we approach in Halloween.
He was working on his laptop late one night when his eyes beheld a ghoulish sight. He could not log in despite several tries, and then suddenly, to no one's surprise, he did the mash. He did the healthcare mash. The healthcare mash. It was a keyboard smash. He did the mash. The website would crash. He did the mash. And he did the healthcare mash. Could design such a site so flawed and so sloppy. The code is so ancient, perhaps it was Hammurabi. He tried to apply, but the site would suspend. I've seen a eunuch with a more functional front end. He did the mash. He did the healthcare mash. The healthcare mash. It was a keyboard smash. He did the mash. He tried to clear his cache. He did the mash. Then did the healthcare mash. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent for a website that has trouble loading. How could the government's web designers create a site with such awful coding? They did the mash. Oh, they did the healthcare mash. The healthcare mash. It was a keyboard smash. They did the mash. They took all of our cash. They did the mash. And did the healthcare mash. You know, 3 years really isn't that long to build a website, especially one that has to do one thing. I'm just saying. You know, I met Joe Biden once. Somebody that looked like Joe Biden.
Okay, I promise you won't have to put up with any more videos like that. But on a serious note, we can have all those perceptions about a national product. We think, you know, can we trust NHS to build something that works for patients? And we've got to remember the patient's perspective on all of it, that, you know, if they have experiences like we've seen that video, they're not going to want to use it. So hopefully I'm going to show you that this national product does not have any of those themes that you saw in that video. And, you know, you can feel really comfortable about using it for our patients. So the challenge I'm going to give you in this session is that it's so easy to go live with what I'm showing you, this product, that you could go live by the end of this webinar. And if you don't believe me, I promise you that has happened in the past, maybe just because they don't want to see me again and you know, don't want to have to watch that video again, who knows, but it is that quick and simple to go live. So what am I going to cover in this session? I'm going to cover this product. How does it actually work? Then we can sort of explore why should we use it? And then if we agree that we see that it works and that we should use it, we can then go on to how do we get this set up for our practices. And then finally, an opportunity for questions, and we'll close on some reminders of some of the useful links that I shared during the slides. So, you know, how does it work? What is the situation with this product? Well, first of all, when we look at what's underneath the hood of the product, let's look around at sort of government websites initially. everything's moved away from just showing information to actually doing things, transactions, or getting tasks done. I don't know if you explored renewing your passport online, but it's so much easier than the old days of trying to take photographs, thinking where they'll be accepted, getting that instant feedback. Renewing your road tax, if you've got an old car like myself, you've seen how that experience is, and you may remember to the old days of going to your post office. And it's no different in the NHS. If you look at the Find a GP page, it enables people to find a GP online and now register with them. And if you look at the design philosophy, there's a similar design about the fonts, the colours, the buttons. And if we wonder why does this happen, it's to meet accessibility standards, and this is where it gets a bit technical, but we need to be able sure that patients with different needs can use our digital pathways and digital products. And the good thing about this is, as a practice, if you use a national product, you don't have that headache to wonder if your website is kept up to date, if this registration process on your website meets those standards. The headache goes to the NHS England team, that they've got to constantly review and make sure that the product keeps up with those standards. So what's an overview of this? Well, basically, just going to mute that. Sorry. Okay. So basically, as an overview, first of all, it's free. If you haven't heard that, reassure you, it's free. Mean that you don't use a practice or PCN don't have to figure out how to fund it. It's not just free for the moment. Its plan is always that it remains free. And it's accessible to patients in different ways. Patients can find it through the Find a GP webpage, through the NHS app, and then through any promotion that you do on your practice website, posters, or messaging. And this is really important. The goal of this was to reduce, reduce admin burden for practices. So not about increasing it. And how does it reduce it? By managing your catchment area with the prospective patients, by really helping to match the patient to the record. So you're avoiding all these exceptions, rejections, that happens far less. And although I'm a digital lead and we're a digital team, clearly it doesn't work for all patients. Digital doesn't suit everyone. We have clear digital exclusion in our patients. So this product that you register with the GP surgery comes with a complete package. It also comes with a paper version of the form that mirrors the online experience as much as possible for such patients. So let's look at some of the numbers. Already in the last 3 months, 31%, so almost a third of registrations are coming through this platform, and that figure just keeps growing. And like I said, a lot of the patients are matched, the vast majority, to their NHS records. 81.5% of practices are live. So, we're really getting close to that sort of almost 100%. And hopefully you're here because you're one of those practices that want to join the 81% of practices that are already live. GP's feedback is high. So when you look at practices, 76% view this positively, and it's even higher for patients. 95% of patients report positive feedback on the product. 1.8 million patients have had a form submitted, and it takes them about 12 minutes to complete the process. Now that may seem long, but when you think about actually how long it takes to complete a paper form or other online forms, you'll be surprised. That's actually quite quick, and it can be even quicker if they use things like the NHS login, because if they do use the NHS login, and I'll show that to you in a moment, it might speed it up even faster for them. And 70% of patients do complete the form. So what questions are asked and why in the form? Well, this is, I guess, me as a GP and then trying to talk to a bird or an animal here. We can be on different pages. I might, as a GP, want to ask tons and tons of questions, but the patient may not even understand my questions, find it too tedious, boring, and not engaged. So I think we've got to reflect that the questions reflect all those different viewpoints. GP practice staff, digital teams, patients. And they're fixed, they're standard set of questions, but the questions are constantly updated, changed and tweaked based on feedback from both patients and us as GP practices. Also, I'm going to show you that if you want to ask additional questions locally, that functionality is also coming in from the end of October. So what does the form ask? Now, yes, I know it's a bit corny, but this is me sliding through the next set of slides. So I'm going to go through this quickly. The slides are already shared, so you can look through them at your leisure if I'm going too quickly for you. So first of all, it's a single form. It's a form that changes, so questions adjust according to the patient's profile. So if you are registering a child, additional questions may pop up in the experience. You don't need to complete a separate GMS1 form for the patient. Now, this may cause some confusion, but even before, if you asked all the questions in your own practice registration form that were already asked in the GMS1 form, you didn't need to duplicate with the GMS1 form. You can feel confident that this national product means that you do not need a separate GMS1 form. This form effectively is a replacement to the GMS1 form. And here at the beginning, it asks, do they want to sign in with the NHS login? This is optional, though. So although it encourages it and that helps us all know that the patient's identity is confirmed and that accurate data, but they can continue without it. So it helps you with those sort of barriers that patients may face. If they do go in with the NHS login, the process might be a little bit quicker because it may pre-populate some of the information, their details for them. So first it asks about their name, it asks then about their date of birth, asks about NHS number. If they don't know it, it helps them to try and find it, but it does allow them to continue on if they don't know their NHS number, so it removes that barrier. It then asks about if they've been previously registered with a UK GP and gets details around that. Asks about current UK address. And this is important because it helps with the next step around catchment area management. So this depends on how your practice is set up. So if your practice does not accept out of catchment area registrations at all, then the experience they'll get is when they put in a postcode that's outside your catchment area, they'll get the message saying that you don't accept registrations from this address. And it really tells them to go back to find an alternative GP practice. If your practice might accept out of catchment area registrations, then the messaging is a bit different. They get this experience which says it flags them that they're outside your normal catchment area. It warns them that you may or may not accept their registration, but they can either continue or choose a different GP practice. So it also doesn't tell them that they're guaranteed to be registered. So it helps manage that expectation with your practice. Next, it asks about contact details, and if they don't put things in, it really tries to highlight to them that they need them. And then it talks about gender and asks the patients about that. Then it talks about ethnicity. It then asks about interpreters. Then the next optional question is something around choice of pharmacy. So it allows the patient to choose a pharmacy and change their choice of pharmacy. I think really helpful to have this because obviously often people have moved areas. If we don't ask it, they may already been set up with a pharmacy in their old area. Before we know it, their first contact, we've sent the prescription to the wrong place and we've got to do all those steps to cancel and reissue. It's optional, so I'll explain that later on, but you as a practice can decide whether or not you want this question in your flow. And when their patient does go through this flow, it helps them with all the details of the practice, even opening hours if they want to see that information. So that can reduce the workload for your reception staff having to manage that. Now I would say we go into sort of GMS 1 style questions. So are you registered with the Defence Medical Services? Do you have an emergency contact? And it collects their details. Have they recently moved to the UK from another country? Where they were born? Again, about recent move to the UK and some further questions around that. TB screen. So this is an optional question that you again can choose to have or not. So if the patient is appropriate, then they will see this question if you've enabled it, and that can help with TB screening. Then you've got the question around the current GP surgery that they want to leave, if that applies to them. Asking about medical conditions, and it gives a list and some free text space for patients to complete. Similar with asking about allergies, then mental health conditions, disabilities, if they've got a carer, and then the carer's details, and then the opposite question if they're a carer themselves, and if so, what type. Communication needs that the patient or their carer might have. Then reasonable adjustments. Not sure if you're aware of this, but there is a requirement to collect information about reasonable adjustments, and you might be aware that there should be a rollout of the reasonable adjustments digital flag. So this can help you be prepared that you're collecting the right information. Then he's asking about repeat medications. Then height and weight, and really usefully, it can convert between metric and imperial. So it makes it easier for both the patients and us. Alcohol screening. Smoking status. And then summary care records. So just checking about the patient's preferences about sharing. Obviously quite a complex thing to explain to patients. So it's got some useful links for the patient to click on if they need more information too. So that was the adult flow. If you're doing a child registration, some of the differences are that at the beginning, if an adult is registering their child, it really highlights that, you know, that the adult should normally be registered too. And if that's been done at the same time, that helps manage that for the practice. Ask some additional questions around education, if other people are involved in their child's care, such as health visitors, social workers, other specialists. Ask about vaccinations and any other carers that we should be aware about. But whatever happens, when you've done the adult or the child flow, you get to a pre-check stage before you can submit your application. And that just lists all your answers to all the questions. It gives you the ability to click on change if you want to change anything that you realize is a mistake. And then the patient can then just click on accept and submit. And that is it. The patient has completed their main registration using the national product. If they've been registering their whole family, they can celebrate, because it's one task off their list. And remember that they can do this 24 hours a day. But there's some additional functionality coming out very soon. So on the 23rd of October, hopefully you'll start to be able to add in an extra step. And if you look at this flow here, so when the registration is complete, first of all, it tells the patient, when to expect maybe to hear some contact from the practice. So really saying, maybe 5 days is how long it may take to process the registration. And it asks for their feedback. So that's that important bit you saw around why 95% of patients are satisfied. It comes from this submission here. But the new thing is this box here, that you have the ability to ask some further local questions. So what will happen is, if you enable that, when that comes out from the 23rd of October, there's another link that you can set up as a practice, and they effectively leave the national form and can continue with the local form that you may want to use. That part, a local form, is not part of the national offer. You may need to use a third-party product or provider to do that. That could be, we'll come on to that later, it could be an automation provider, it could be a website platform, but that could ask further questions that you want to ask, which are not covered in the national form. Okay, so we've covered the patient experience. Now, how does the practice receive the completed online form? At the moment, you receive them via email, so NHS Mail, from this email address here. And basically, the content of the form is within the body of the email, so in the actual email, all the answers. And it's also attached as a PDF file, so you could attach it or save it into the patient's record. Effectively, you're going to probably be cutting and pasting the information from this email into the patient's record as part of their registration. But this is the standard process that you get from now. Things aren't going to change and improve. And you've also got options even from today if you want to sort of automate this. I'll cover that in a moment later on. So how do patients find this service? Well, through your practice website promotion, through the NHS website, that Find a GP page, through the NHS app and the paper form. So let's show you those in turn. So in your web page, you've probably got a page or section about new registrations. You'll get a unique link for your form for your practice. So you've just got to basically replace any link or anything you've got in your web page with this link. You may need to look at the blurb that you've got just to adjust it so it tailors the information for the national product. I'd also recommend use one of these posters that you can download this poster, and we'll show you later on, but you can add a QR code for your form, And then maybe if this is displayed in your reception area, the desk, or in your front door, so patients who might have moved to the area, they come to your building when you're shut, they see it, and they scan the code, they start registering. Maybe they're queuing up at the reception desk thinking, how do I register? They see the poster, they scan it, they don't bother your reception staff, and reduces your reception staff workload. So that's the practice level promotion. On the Find a GP page, so when patients search their postcode looking for practices, now you'll find that if you're live with this product, you get this really big, bold link here. So this link, if they click on it, it takes them to the registration form for your practice. If a practice doesn't have that link, you can see that there's no link that appears for them. And the only way you can get this link is with a national product. No other online registration product platform will give you this link. The NHS app has similar, and I've made a video that walks you through how that experience is for the patient. So you can scan that QR code if you want to watch the video, but it's similar to the Find a GP experience. It's a bit quicker because the NHS app is already using the NHS login. They don't have to enter it in again. This whole process is integrated into the NHS app experience. And maybe lastly, but really importantly, the paper form version for the digitally excluded. So this is how it looks at the moment, but it may be updated soon. So if you look at this, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. So it's an H-page document at the moment. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but to me, it looks quite professional. And even if you needed to add some local questions, local information, you could obviously staple or attach extra pages to the end, or maybe as a cover sheet. So we've covered how does it work. Let's move on to, well, why should we use it? So I might not have convinced you so far from what you've seen that you want to abandon what you're doing now. You may be really happy with paper. If that is the case, I'll just ask you before you make a final decision, please scan this QR code on the left to try it from a patient's perspective, see what you think. And scan the QR code on the right to get more information on the web pages about this product. So let's look at what the situation is across the country. So, we're asking the question, why should we use it? So like I said, 81.5% of practices are already using it. So the question we've got to ask is why are they using it and we're not? In London, the figures are maybe slightly lower, maybe sort of 60, coming up to, actually that figure's probably climbing. So it's probably around about 67, coming up to maybe 70% of practices, but we're below that national average. And if we look at the list of areas, actually London is now the lowest uptake area in the country, which is why we're doing these webinars and why we're really happy that you're attending today, so we can help you to go live and join the other 81% of practices that are already live. In your ICB, North Central London, you're similar to the London average at 67.4%. So here are the 57 practices that are in NCL and not currently live. This data is updated every Wednesday, so this is from last Wednesday. I'm hoping that you're spotting your practice in this list, and that's why you're here today. If you can't, then there could be some confusion. Maybe you're partially live or you're live but you don't realise it. Happy for us to pick that up with you if you can't see your practice name in this list. I'd also say it'd be really helpful if you know any of the practices in that list who, might have overlooked the product and, you want to just tell them about it to help other sort of busy practice managers in NCL. So what are the benefits for practices? Well, we've touched on this already, but that workload benefit, that it reduces your admin in the practice, accessibility, you don't have to worry about, is it accessible for all patients? That's been managed by NHS England, manages your catchment area. There's lots of feedback that shapes the development of this product, and it's free. Yes, I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. It's free and it's really easy to join and set up. And then this bit here, we're going to expand on automation. So you saw the NHS mail receipt of the form that I showed earlier, but you can use third-party companies at cost, which can automate this, and we'll explain that a bit more. So it can really reduce your workload even further. And in addition, there's work going on, so this will arrive directly into EMIS, hopefully by the 31st of January next year, or around that point. And that again would be free when it arrives, and that could also all just help reduce your workload with managing registrations. Well, I'm going to mention something and then not unmention it if I can, if there is even such a word as unmention it, who knows. So the GP contract, don't we love the GP contract? Well, whatever your emotions are about the GP contract, it does state in the GP contract that practices need to be live solely with using just the online and paper version of the Register with the GP Surgery Service by the 31st of October, so by Halloween. And that's hopefully why you're also here at this webinar today, as we're only a couple of weeks away from that deadline. But I'm now going to unmention the contract. We don't want you to think about the contract at the moment. We want you to think that you really want to use this rather than you feel you have to. And you kind of get on that bandwagon with the other 81% of practices that they're using it, and you're just joining them. And we're going in this vision of having a single registration form for our patients. And if you put aside the GP contract, I just want to say that I'm not a profit sharing GP. I'm purely a salaried or a sessional GP. But from a financial perspective, if patients are hitting find a GP, if you're that first practice there and your neighbouring practice has a link, will patients just be more likely to skip you and go to the next practice as an option that they want to register with the practice that they can do it online? Maybe it's like in the evening, they're busy and they don't have time to figure out how to register with the first practice. So could this impact on practice finances, that you see a reduction in registration? So really the question I'm asking is, can you afford not to use this service if your neighbouring practices are? And what's the feedback from practices? So here's some feedback from some practices in my borough, in Ealing. I promise you I didn't pay them any pots of gold from any rainbows to get these comments, but you can see the theme is that they like it, they like the branding, it's staff are happy with it, and it's made things simpler for them. Patients raise similar amount of positivity, if not even higher. And you can see that the theme here is about the fact that patients don't need to travel to any physical building to do this. I'm going to pick up the question in the chat in a moment about how we can reduce the workload for practices even more and what is the future with this. So just bear with me for a few more minutes and I'll answer the question in the chat. So what are the negativities of the product? I want to give us all a balanced perspective of this. So standardized questions. So it's a fixed question set. You cannot change those questions in those national form at the moment. But you saw that I showed the new functionality coming on from the 23rd of October. So you can add on a step at the end of the form that the patient is navigated to ask further questions that your practice are asking them that they can answer it. And then if we think of more deeply about this, I would raise the challenge: do we just ask too many questions anyway? You know, is that a barrier to registration? Do we use all the data that we get back from the questions? Why is it we're just asking those questions to new registrations? Why are we not also asking it to our currently registered patients? You know, if they've been registered for 20 years, things could have changed. You know, where is the right point to ask those questions? Yes, it's convenient at registration, but should it also be done as a general business process for all our patients when appropriate? Putting that aside, though, if we think there's a question we really think should be in the national form, the national question, we can raise it with the national team, and they have taken on that feedback and often introduced new questions or tweaked existing questions. And then, you know, even if we design our perfect questions, do the patients actually respond in a perfect way? Do they understand them? Can we use their responses? So sometimes we think we can resolve everything by asking a question, but often we can't. And we get now increasingly GP to GP transfer of information from records. And even if we wanted to ask any additional questions, you know, we can use two-way messaging, we can ask them to email responses back. So there are workarounds if you wanted to add more local questions. The next limitation is around that they cannot upload any documents as part of this process. They can't upload photo ID, proof of address, immunisation histories. They can only use the NHS login to authenticate their identity. But again, I'd say that maybe some of those limitations could actually be strengths. What do we do with all this ID and proof? We're not digital experts to know if they've photoshopped it. We're not allowed to really store it. We can't save it in their patient's record. It's sensitive information. We've got to delete it. So even if there's a query later on, we don't have those documents to check against, which they originally submitted as part of their registration. It also fits with the whole NHS guidance about not insisting on ID or proof of address to register. So it can save admin time when you start to move away from that process. And the NHS login potentially, I would say, is more robust, more secure to confirm that identity than anything we can do with ID and proof of address that gets sent to us. But if you still wanted to collect that, you could obviously supplement the process by, ask them to email it or use two-way messaging to ask them to send photographs of their documents. And this is a question I would pose to us all. Do we really test the products that we buy? We might buy a third-party form from a company to register our patients, but we often focus on what we get back in our practice. We don't check what does the patient experience. For example, is it appropriate to use SNOMED codes? Like there's some products, they ask the patient to select all the SNOMED codes for their allergies, and that gets automatically coded. What's the risk that the patient just doesn't navigate it? SNOMED codes are not designed to be really patient fronting, or there could be glitches that they hit other boxes and they can't type in anything under other. So I think we often assume that, it must be fine because lots of people are using it and we don't test it. So this product gives the headache to the whole NHS England team for any glitches around the design or safety of the product. It definitely shifts the focus to the national team rather than us as practices having to feel what we've rolled out is safe. And then if we look at the future roadmap of this product, I've mentioned about the local question and content that starts to come out in a couple of weeks' time, but I think this is where I want to answer the questions in the chat. You will have integration start to emerge, and the hope is that will arrive for EMIS in January 25, and similar with TPP, but although I appreciate that's not so relevant for NCL. And if you can't wait for that, or you're worried that it's going to slip, there are automation providers that at cost can do that for you now, and we'll pick that up in a moment. And the right hand bit of this slide is a bit jargony and technical, but just think that behind the scenes, how the registrations are actually being processed, they're currently using NHAIS, and that will change to PCRM. Yes, these are acronyms that probably mean nothing to most of us, but think of this as similar to how cervical screening moved from NHAIS to the CSMS that happened obviously earlier this year. And that will also improve functionality. It'll help update patient contact details more automatically and help manage things like pharmacy changes. So there we go. That's what's happening with the roadmap with integration and interoperability. And this is showing you, if you can't wait for that, what you can do with third-party products. So this is robotic process automation, RPA. If you can't visualize this, I kind of imagine it as if we had a software that was kind of imitating a robot sitting in front of EMIS, just clicking the buttons. If your admin staff were cutting and pasting things into the patient's record when you're registering the patient, this is what the bot is doing. So this is an example video from one of the providers that do that. And at the moment, there are 3 companies that can offer this for your practice. So GP Automate, Health Tech One, and JIFJAF. So what happens is they've worked with the national team. So the national team behind the register with the GP surgery service. The form goes to them, and they basically then input it into either System 1 or EMIS for you. But there's a cost that applies to that. I'd always recommend, if you're exploring this, definitely explore how the costs and the service could work from any of these 3. Right, so hopefully we've explained how does it work. Maybe I've hopefully shown you why we should use it. If you're not sure why we should use it, please continue to post comments in the chat and we can pick that up. Okay, so how do we set it up? I'm going to show you like a Lego style guide to 13 simple steps of how to set it up. Bit like that Lego set. I think it is simple, but you don't need to do it completely in the right order. You don't need to do even all of the steps that I'm suggesting to you. And if I've drained you already and you want to get a cup of coffee, that's absolutely fine. This is being recorded. You've got the slides. You can do it at your leisure. But I guess I'm asking you, but please just do it at some point in the near future. So first step, and the most important step, is Profile Manager. So Profile Manager may be familiar to you for responding to NHS website reviews or updating some of your details on the NHS website. Usually a practice manager and operational manager has access to this in the practice. If you don't, you're not sure how to get access, here are the support details here. We'll also show you in a moment a quicker step for us to get you on live with the product if you can't get the time to even get access to Profile Manager, so bear with us. But I want us all to understand this because this could be useful for you in the future to manage things of the product through Profile Manager. So once you've logged into Profile Manager, you've got this new big box at the bottom, says sign up with a register with a GP surgery service. So you click on that. It gives you some blurb to read. I promise you're not signing away all your life if you're going to go live, but you can scan read that when you do it, and then you click continue. It's asked you to confirm the practice you want to go live. Now, if you're a manic practice manager managing lots of different practices, heart definitely goes out to you. Don't know how you're doing what you're doing, and you'll have a list of all the practices that you manage, and you're going to have to repeat what I'm showing you for each practice one by one. But for us normal humans that might only just have one practice that we manage, and we still find that's like a struggle, you just click on that practice and then you click continue. It's asking you for the email address that your practice wants to receive the forms at, so you type it in. A verification code is sent to that email address, and you type in the verification code and you click continue. So that hopefully resolves that you've not mistyped the email address and that the emails are not arriving in spam or junk. You did receive the email. Then you ask a few questions. Does your surgery offer a language interpretation service for patients? Surely the answer is yes for everyone. Are you dispensing surgery? I think for NCL, surely the answer is no for your. And then do you want to offer your patients the opportunity to nominate a pharmacy during registration? I showed you those questions. I would encourage you to answer yes, but you could obviously answer no. Do you want to check if your patients are eligible for TB screening? That's a local decision. Your ICB may also give you a steer what they feel should be right. I think in London, a lot of us would put yes, because obviously TB rates have risen in London in recent years. And that is it. At the moment, that's all the questions you're being asked. You're asked to confirm that that's all correct, and you click confirm and submit really to continue. And then you're live. You get that on-screen notification telling you that you're complete. You also get an email confirmation. The most useful bit of this email is it's got your unique link. So this is your unique link that your practice needs to use with the patients to navigate them to the form. So this is what you might put into your web page. The Find a GP web page gets updated. That can take a bit longer. It can take up to 48 hours before that link starts to merge, showing that you can now register with your practice online. And this shows you how that link kind of works. It's kind of that bit, gpregistration.nhs.uk with your practice ODS code. So that will be the structure of the link that you get for your form. Okay, what if you need to turn off the service? Well, if you wanted to, hopefully you'll never need to, but if you wanted to, you go to NHS Profile Manager again, you go back to sign up with a GP surgery box, you click on that. Now what you see looks different. It shows your practice, it shows the details, the settings of your practice for the service. So if you just click on view details, and then on view details, you've got this line here, patient access. It's currently on, and you can click on change. When you click on change, really, this is a toggle switch. So you can turn it off completely by going to this option here, turn off Find a GP, and also it turns off that unique link. So anyone who has that link, it will stop working for them. Or you could turn it off partially, where you keep the link live, but you turn it off the Find a GP page. And if you ever want to toggle this back on and off, you just repeat the process, go back to Profile Manager, and you can turn it on again. And then you click continue. But if that's too complex for you, Profile Manager access is a struggle, then don't panic. First of all, like I said, we've got Nicole from the national team in the web chat. you could even just give him the details for you for your practice directly, and the details he needs is find your practice name, your ODS code, practice manager email address, and the email address that your practice wants to receive forms. You could use this online form here from the team. I'll answer the question in the chat about Health Tech 1 in a moment, but basically here, if you want to just fill in this online form, you can use this QR code here. It just collects the same information and goes to the national team, and that's the email address for the national team as well. So you've got lots of ways. Either post it into the chat and Nicole will jump in, use this form link here, or just email the details across to that email address. Okay. Maybe, okay, do you know what? Maybe I'll answer the question in the chat now. So the question in the chat is it mandatory to use the service before the 31st of October? Technically, yes, your GP contract states it. And at the moment, the London YLMC is not raising any concerns about that. It's not in the list of BMA collective actions either. So at the moment, 2 weeks away, yes, the answer is yes. Like I said, though, we want you to feel that you want to use it rather than you don't feel like you're forced into it. The specific question asked in the chat was, this practice is raising that they use Health Tech 1 for automated registrations at the moment. Well, Health Tech 1 is actually supportive of the move to the national form. They're actually starting the process now to switch their practices over. So let's just explain. If you're using Health Tech 1, they provide the automation aspect. They also provide their own registration form. So what we're saying is you can stay with Health Tech 1 for the automation. You would just be switched from the Health Tech 1 registration form to the NHS England form. They've already started the process, I think even this week or even last week, to start to promote to the practices that you can switch over. We'd encourage you to reach out to Health Tech 1 and make sure you get switched over. There's only one small thing I'll mention, which we'll pick up on later on. They will also offer to redirect your existing Health Tech 1 link to the NHSE form link, and you can certainly do that, but I'd also recommend that you do make the effort to actually update the link in your web page, and that you do know your unique link for the national form, because you may want to use it in posters and so forth. And the reason I flag that is it just reduces the chance of things going wrong. You know, if you rely on a redirection, the redirection could fail and then the patients can't get to the national form. If you use the direct link, it just reduces the risk from business continuity that you definitely have it correct. You know, if things change in the future, you're using different automation providers, or you're not even using automation in the future, you don't forget that you need to change the link. It's just you've done it once and you can forget about it. Okay, I'm going to go back to my Lego kit. So step 2, check your catchment area. So once you've gone live, you know, about 20% of practices, we believe, might have incorrectly drawn catchment areas. So the first test we'll suggest to do is go to Find GP page, type in your practice postcode as if you were a test patient using that postcode, and see that your practice is shown at the top of the list. Because you'd think that would be the case, because distance-wise, obviously it's 0 miles and you're within the catchment area. If that's not the case, that would probably already flag you've got an issue with your setup. And if you did have an issue, how do you amend it? Well, there's a hub. There's a catchment area hub, a web portal, which you can access that can then allow you to amend your catchment area. So if you do want access to it, first of all, you need to have access to the SDCS, the Strategic Data Collection Service. That may mean something to you, and you already know that you've got access to that, probably from EDEC submissions. If you don't, this is the web link here. There's the email address. So the first step is get access to SDCS. Once you've done that, usually within a few weeks, you're automatically starting to get details of how you can get access to the hub. Because the SDCS shared the details with the catchment area hub team. But you may find that, you know, if you want to go live before the 31st of October, you can't wait for that. They're trying to update it more regularly because they are aware that obviously practices may be rushing to go live, and they may see catchment area issues. Hopefully that's even going to be more on a weekly basis, but I would suggest you might then want to send an email to the catchment support team here, that top email address, if you're having problems getting access to the hub. Once you're in the hub, you can see user guides that will walk you through the how to amend your catchment area. Those guides are in the process of being updated at the moment, and we've also asked for them to actually be put on the front page of the hub, that you don't even have to log in to the hub to access them. You can see them straight away. So hopefully I'll take that feedback on board. There's also a guide here from NHS England that tries to help support you through how to measure catchment area. So that's a guide on that bottom link there. The catchment area preferences are managed from your EDEC submission. So remember I showed you these two experiences where at the beginning you either got this experience where you don't accept registrations out for your catchment area and the patient gets this message here, or you do and they get this message here. That comes from your EDEC submission. So annually, and in October is usually the month where we do those submissions. That's where it defines what your status is. If you've made a change to your situation or you're not even sure what your setting is, you can also email the website team on that email address here if you want to change things or check what your settings are. Test also find a GP page, because if you test it as a test patient, you'll also be able to see what your settings are as well. So that's step 2. Step 3 is if you're receiving things via NHS Mail, personally I'd suggest maybe you want to create a registrations subfolder in your inbox. And you may want to create an NHS Mail rule like this. This can mean that when you get emails from the registration form team, they could be automatically put into that subfolder. It may make it easier for your staff to manage and track. Step 4, do a test registration. You've got the link now. Go onto your link for your practice, pretend to be a patient, submit one, and make sure you get the registration form back in your inbox so you feel that happy that things are going well. This is a photo from one of the early pilot practices. You can read their experiences and the experiences of other practices by that QR code in the bottom right. Step 5, you may want to update the data template entry on EMIS to match the order of the national form. Some ICB, so for example, us in North West London ICB, we've already done that. It just may make it easier for your staff when they're doing manual registrations. And remember, whatever you're doing, whether you're using an automation product, whether you're waiting for the national integration with EMIS that arrives next year, there'll always be cases where there's an issue with the form, it can't be automated and you'll have to do manual registration. So it's still a useful step regardless of the future. Step 6, this is a tip rather than a step. You may not be aware, but you can also have free messaging to notify the patient that you have processed their registration and they're now registered. What happens is the service will try to send them an NHS app notification first, so an NHS app message. If they don't have the NHS app or they don't have notifications turned on for the NHS app, it'll attempt to send an email. If we don't give them an email address, if we don't have the email address for the patient, it'll attempt a text message. If that's not possible, it will then send out a postal letter. So at the moment, there's no charge for this. And it could help with practices if you're thinking about SMS costs. And if you want to activate it, yes, we've got to go back into Profile Manager. We've got to go back into Signed Up with a GP Surgery tab. So we click on that. We click again on View Details. Hopefully this is all becoming familiar. Previously, I showed you the patient access bit. Now, if you look below, Send Registration Message is on yes. If you click on Change, this is a question you ask. Do you want us to message patients to tell them their registration has been accepted? So you can toggle from yes or no to no and just click Continue. So that was that functionality. So just a tip that I'd recommend to practices do, and that will work with whatever way you register the patients. When you process that registration, whether it's through a different form, a paper form, the national product, it will send that message notification. So now we're on step 7, your paper forms. So there may be some dusty forms in a reception desk somewhere, or you may have a beautiful template that you print out, but we're asking you to use the national one. So again, go back to Profile Manager, go back to Sign Up GP tab, and I've shown you this at the top, but if you look lower down, there's a link here that allows you to download the paper form. So you can download the latest version of it there. There's also a link here on the right, which will give you this form. Just be aware that this form is likely to have its first update since its launch last July, in July 23. So there may be a newer version updated about to come out, but there you have it. And if you want to localize it, maybe just add on some extra pages at the end if you feel there's additional questions or things you want to do. Another little tip, I'm not sure if you're aware that NHS England has also produced questionnaires, health questionnaires for different languages, and they're dual language, like they have the left-hand side in English and the right-hand side in the other language. It also there's some guidance documents to patients on how to use the NHS, how to use services. So you might want to set up preset messages to text or communicate to patients these other forms if you're struggling with health inequalities, language barriers, or digital exclusion. Okay, step 8 is on that theme of preset messages. There may be a couple that you want to set up. One about, there's a link, maybe one with your unique link to the form. Please register with our practice using this link. I see that scenario as being used with, for example, parents who've just had a newborn baby. Maybe you've got the maternity notification. You could text the parents that link and start them thinking about registering their newborn. Here's a template that just sort of confirms that they've been registered by your practice and also promotes the NHS app. You might not need that if you're using the NHS Notify service that I just showed you, which does that for you. And then here's a third sort of template message about catchment area issues. If you do possibly accept out of area catchment registrations, but you then decide for that particular patient that you're not going to accept them, you're not going to process their registration, you might want a template message like this, so you can text them to say that you're not going to process them, but navigate them back to the Find a GP page to find an alternative practice. Okay, step 9, your web page. So I'm asking you to go to your web page that covers registration of new patients, put in the new link that's here. Even if you're with Health Tech One and they're going to redirect you, I'd probably encourage you to think, do you just want to switch it anyway, so there's no confusion? And just look at your content, your blurb. Is it all appropriate for the national form? Just check that it still all applies, or if you want to make any tweaks. If you struggle to update your web page, most of the main website providers are fully aware of the national form, so they may be able to assist you in the process. Step 10. I've shown you some of the practice promotion materials that you can download and see. I'll just show you a little clip of a video as well that you might want for waiting rooms. Personally, I think the video is not as useful as the posters because, often new patients aren't waiting in the waiting room for long enough to see it. But, see what you think about the video. So, you may want to put on media screens like a simpler slide like this as well. Okay, but on those materials, you need to put the QR code in. So here's a useful tip. So even if the rest of this webinar bored you completely, if you don't know how to do QR codes, hopefully I'm going to show you now. And this is something that once you learn, just stick QR codes on everything, every single bit of you display in your practice. I personally think you need a QR code for any hope of a patient scanning it. No one can type in really long URLs into their browsers accurately, so they'll just give up. So how do you do it? That link for your form, you just paste it into the search bar of the Edge browser. You hover over some white bit of the page, right click, you'll see this option here that says create QR code for this page, and hey presto, like magic, QR code appears, and you can just copy it and paste it into whatever document we want. That's all completely free and simple to do. And you can put obviously anything you want into that search bar, any web page, to try and create that QR code. You can do the same with the Chrome browser, exactly the same pretty much, but there's one difference. You get a lovely dinosaur in the middle. So if, like me, you still remember watching Jurassic Park in the cinema and you love dinosaurs, maybe just keep that dinosaur. But really that dinosaur symbolizes dead space. So if you're a bit creative, you can put maybe your practice's logo or something over the dinosaur, and you've got some just creativity there. Step 11 is about your auto reply email address. So the main practice generic email address may be the one that's also set up to receive the registration forms. Personally, I'd recommend that you add a line about like this, like want to register with our practice, here's the link, because it might just reduce some of your workload even further, that the patient's found your email address, they're emailing you about how they get registered, and your auto reply already starts to tell them how to do it. And similar step 12 for maybe email signatures. So there may be some staff members, reception leads, core admin staff, that they decide to put it in their signature too, so it's easy for them to remember. and it helps them when they're replying to any queries. So I'm going to kind of close on maybe the last most important step in your journey, step 13. You're hopefully about to start this journey now of this webinar that, and by the way, like I said at the beginning of the webinar, you could go live in minutes, definitely by the end of today. But to really get your practice staff to test it themselves, really try pretending to be a test patient. I don't feel reception staff can ever really promote it unless they've tested it themselves and understand it. Then they'll feel comfortable just to mention it to patients if they're getting phone queries, for example. And they've got to believe in it, that this was all about also reducing workload for everyone. It wasn't just to benefit the patients, it's also to benefit us in practice. So I've gone through how does it work, why should we use it, how do we set it up. We now come into the end of time, and I'm going to close on questions and the useful links. So this final slide shows you some of the top links that I've shared in the slides. So you've got the slide pack hopefully now emailed to you, so you can flick to that last slide as well for those useful links. Questions in the chat. I've been trying to follow the questions. There's one about how those who are not using HealthTech One, how do we add in the extra documents? I think you're saying extra questions, extra pages. So first of all, when the functionality comes out, if you want to add in local steps, you could reach out to your website provider. Sometimes they may have a form already that they use for registration. Do they offer you like a cut down version which just asks you the extra questions that you want to answer? You might want to look again at this slide that shows you all the questions that are being asked by the national form and what are the ones that you would want to add on locally. So that could be using a website form. Those automation providers that I showed you at the beginning, HealthTech One, GP Automate and JIFJAF, if you're already using them or exploring them, you could approach them about can they ask the questions that you want and how does that work from a cost perspective or functionality. That's a second option. A third option is just using other things like two-way messaging. So you often have got a platform. Most commonly, I think in North Central London, you've got things like iPlato and you've got AccuRx. So maybe you send a link to the patient to ask them to submit photos or further things that you want to add into the record. You may also want to just ask them to email things across. So those are ways that you could add things across. I appreciate that all of that is not perfect. It's not like seamlessly going into their records, but they're all options you've got to your hands to consider. I think there's another one about child immunisations. At top level, it does ask the question about immunisations. It doesn't allow them to upload all the immunisation histories. Personally, I don't know what you think about it. I find that often, even when you ask them to give things, often it's not clear. It's either like confusing the dates, what exact immunisations they want. And I often think you end up asking for either copies of the Red Book or the immunisation histories. But remember, you're also hopefully getting a GP to GP transfer. So do you wait for that to come across? Even if the patient gives you the immunisation history as a registration, do you really want to code it all then? Or do you want to wait for the GP to GP transfer and then see if there's missing data sets that you want to complete? So I think you've got to look at your workflow. But I think there's pros and cons about trying to get that data at the registration stage. But the product doesn't at the moment allow uploading of any registration documents. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions in the chat. I'd also like to thank you as an audience. You've definitely engaged in the chat and asked those questions. We are reaching the end of time, but could anyone who's got any burning question, it could be that you really don't want to use this product for this reason, or you've absolutely got a critical question that you don't feel comfortable, please post it before you go. We're here to help. You can also come off mute if you want to ask it to us directly. Anything is fine. So let me know now before we close. I'm going to take that silence that no one has a burning question. And if so, I'm going to suggest then I let you go. And before I let you go, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate how busy you all are. that 31st of October deadline may seem really near. It just takes minutes to go live. I've just shown you the whole realm of the functionality and everything, just to give you that assurance. You don't have to overthink it. You can just literally do it. Just go with the confidence that so many practices are using it. It can't be that bad. And actually, it is a really good product. When you start to embrace it, you start to see what the benefits are. And with that local functionality, it hopefully will resolve everything that you may want to tailor and customize at local level too. Okay, thank you for your time, and we'll let you all go now. Bye.